Today's topic is about otoacoustic emissions, and it's also about the r14o. We really hope that we can help you to become more comfortable with the topic so that you are able to demonstrate it in front of your customers. Also, if you want to, you will be able to explain what is an otoacoustic emission. Then I'll cover some theory that goes quite in depth, and so it's not important that you are able to explain to others how it works, but at least I'll hope that you be able to understand the differences and follow the story about DPOE and TOE. Then I hope that after the presentation you will be able to explain to end users how to set up the instrument so that they get most out of their OAE measurements. And then quite important, if you're not yet fully comfortable with recognizing which customer could be interested in OAEs, we like to help you developing a market for that and recognizing what customers are most interested in otoacoustic emissions. The contents of today is following these learning outcomes. I will start with a demonstration of OAE measurements and then explain after that how does the ear produce sound, what is an otoacoustic emission, and then explain how we can measure those with two different technologies. Then I go back to showing live from my r14o how to change the settings or what the different settings mean and what choices to make so that you get most out of the measurements. And then the last few minutes we'll talk about who are our typical end users. Up here I have the new probe of our instrument. Any good demonstration starts with a very good preparation. So actually before I do this demo, I've already prepared myself, and part of that I want to share with you anyway so that you get familiar of what to do. And actually the first step starts by going into the general setup, finding the OAE tab, and in here you have the probe check. The reason that before I do a demo, I always first do a probe check is because my eyes get worse over the years. I'm getting older. I don't see actually if there is a little bit of debris or earwax in the ear tip, and by doing a probe check I get an idea if I need to clean it, yes or no. I insert it in our test cavity. You should have with r14o such a black 1 milliliter test cavity. After it's fully inserted, I hit the probe check button, and then we'll see it starts testing. It will look for a volume of 1 milliliter plus or minus something. It's quite a big margin that is acceptable, and then it will have a look if the two curves are at certain points within the acceptable range. For me, is actually the most important part is, are those two curves on top of each other? If they are calibrated properly, those two curves is basically what the microphone records from the two speakers. If one of the channels in the probe tip is slightly blocked by some dirt, then you will see that the intensity of one has shifted compared to the other one, and that is for me a hint that I should clean it. Now, if you don't know how to clean it, the cap that is on the probe needs to be pressed onto the rest of the housing, and then you turn so that you align the two dots that is on the probe, and then it comes apart. You can then clean the tip, and then afterwards you need to mount and press it again and turn it again. Now, my probe check was okay, so this is what I would have done without showing you if you were a real customer, but it means that I'm quite comfortable that I can measure a good OAE. I'll use my own ear as a demo. Now I need to find the right test. We see a TOE screening test, TOE diagnostic test, DPOE diagnostic test, and there's one more on the next screen, DPOE screening. And actually we could start with the DPOE screening. It's a quick test. So the screen became quite simple compared to how the DP screen looked like before. Before the current software, there was only one test, which is the diagnostic test, and now we made also for the DPOE screening test. In this case, I'm not going to show you with which settings I'm testing. I'll show that when we get at the settings part. I simply hit start and have a look what happens. And here the test stopped. What you could see during the measurement is that first, in the beginning, we do a calibration, making sure that the probe is properly placed, and then also correct any uh, the intensities of the presented tones so that it matches with the ear canal volume that's in my ear. And actually, the calibration took longer than the measurement itself because, yeah, nowadays DPOE can be measured very quickly, and it's very quiet around me, so it was very easy to get this pass. So I could do the other ear quickly to see how that goes. Um, this time I try not to hold the probe. If I have it hands-free, there is less chance that I create noise by holding it. Now, you notice I made a mistake that everyone in the field will do. I forgot to swap ears. So now I did my left ear on the, and I did it on the, while the right ear was selected. So now I click on the left ear, measure again. At least now we have 2 ears measured on the screen. But the idea is of course clear. If it was on a patient, I need to retest my right ear again just to have the correct data. Or if it was pass already, maybe I don't care. A pass is a pass. Okay, that's the screening test. Not much to tell here if it's just about the measurement. When I go out, it asks me, do I want to save? And yes, I want to. But I didn't select the patient yet, so it will now ask me which patient was this. I could create a new one by hitting the plus first, but I actually like to put this one under oh yeah, the one that is already in the top of the list. I used it this morning as well, patient demos. So I can just hit the check mark and then it is saved and I'm thrown back to the main menu. Now, because now we have a patient selected by saving, it's remembering this patient. And if we now go to the diagnostic test for the DPOE, we can actually see that the patient name is in the top, so it's showing me which one is selected. Before it was unknown patient mentioned there. Let's quickly have a look what protocol is selected. I want to have protocol number 1, which is the case. I'm not showing you the settings. I was just checking for myself that I didn't actually accidentally took protocol number 2, because that is something I will show immediately after. Let's test again. So what you saw here is that during the calibration, you get the 2 curves on the screen, the same ones as during the probe check. Then afterwards, you jump to testing the frequencies that it was selected for testing. Actually, there is a 4th frequency selected, but we never got to test it because the first 3 were already a pass, and it will stop when 3 out of 4 are a pass. So of course, the difference between the screening is that here you have the data on the screen, so you see the signal and you see the noise ratio, and you see tabular information with all the numbers in there. I also like to show off what the instrument can do, meaning I'm going to do another test, but this test is not configured with the purpose of screening. This test is actually to measure all frequencies that are available for DPOE. So it will take a little bit longer until it's finished, but let's have a look. So now that is done. This is actually quite a nice measurement for someone my age. I'm sure that my hearing in the highest frequency is not the same as when I was 20 years old. So that the OAE is at a lower level there is completely normal, of course. But still, it turned red there. If we look at the numbers, then the signal to noise ratio might be big enough, but still it turned red. The reason why is that there is a requirement that otoacoustic emissions are at least above -10 dB SPL. That's a safety measure. With any equipment on the market, there is a chance that if you accept OAEs that are at a too low level, that you actually measure an artifact that could be produced by the equipment. Depends a little bit on how the probe is positioned and other things, but having this -10 as a safety barrier, that is a very common thing to do. And it also applies to our instrument. It says very big refer. Doesn't have a meaning here because I was just too lazy to actually switch off the pass and refer option. And yeah, I simply wanted to show the full range that we can test. And testing those high frequencies is perhaps not that interesting for newborn screening or for testing on children, but in applications where doctors want to screen the high frequencies and monitor that over time, maybe together with audiometry and in relation to ototoxic medication. I did not demonstrate another thing, which is super interesting, but it's very difficult to demonstrate by myself. Our measurement is very, I would say, it became a lot better at handling noise. So during the measurement, it's giving a lower weight to the measurements that are noisy and giving a higher weight in the average to the measurements that are more quiet. And what I could do is I could try to do a measurement on myself while I talk myself, but the talking is so loud that I need to be careful to do that during the calibration. So what I'll do is I'll try doing that. Just 1 second. I'll try doing that with the screening protocol, but on purpose, I'll keep quiet during the calibration, and then I start talking during the measurement to show how does it react on noise. And it would be more ideal if someone else would make the noise, but let's see what happens. In real life, of course, also patients can make the noise, but if it's just heavy breathing, then it's very easy to overcome, and we find the silent moments and have a very good measurement. If it is crying, then it's probably so loud and so constant that the measurement might be more difficult to complete. But let's see what.
Do you want me talking?
Yes.
Do you want me talking instead of being you talking? It's easier if I'm talking. Hello. Have a nice day.
Yeah, but it's still going too easy. So let's see. Oh, it's still passed. You didn't make enough noise. What we actually see is, okay. But thank you, because this is something that makes it interesting. But for example, if you try the OAE in a noisy environment of an exhibition, then the whole noise floor will just increase. We can see the noise floor is actually higher than before. But the best demo is almost in the hospital on a real patient, because if the patient is not fully cooperative, you will see that because a patient will not always be noisy, it will still manage to make use of the silent times. And yeah, in this regard, our OAE has improved a massive amount compared to before. With the old software, the measurement would have stopped just because Barbara talked, or just because I replied to her, and it would say too noisy. And in this case, we've implemented it that it can be not rejected, but taken with a lower weight in the averaging. Oh, that's a good idea. Do you play a particular instrument or no? Okay, let's go over to TOAE and do a little bit of demo there. I'll start with the screening again. So you'll recognize, of course, that the two screening screens of DPOE and TOE are so similar. I think that a normal operator would hardly recognize which test it is. You will start to recognize it pretty easy. Now, and the reason why it's easy to recognize the difference is two things. We have a progress bar on the TOE, while we don't do that on the DPOE. And the technology of TOE measures all frequencies at the same time, and DPOE did measure one at a time. So during the measurement, it's very easy to recognize which one it is. I also want to demonstrate the diagnostic TOE, but this comes with a special comment. Our diagnostic TOE requires a little bit more from our processor. It's because it's updating 3 different graphs, and at the same time it's now communicating with the PC, and we've not optimized our software to manage all those tasks at the same time. If you demo TOE from this software when it's connected, actually, because of a latency problem in the communication, the measurement will not stop when you tell it to stop. So what I'll do is I actually put the probe in my ear, I switch off this program, do a measurement on the instrument, and then switch on the program again and show you the result. And then you still get a feeling for how long that it took, but well, in this demo, you don't see exactly how it got to the result. So I'll switch this one off, and I'm now going to press on start. And it passed. So if someone had a stopwatch, then you could tell me how long it took. I need to find this small program again so that you can have a look at the result. Now, here I have a couple of things to explain, because I use the same protocol as the screening protocol. So it is measuring 3 frequencies out of 4 to be passed. But in TOE, you measure all frequencies at the same time, and we don't switch that off in the graph. So you see actually 5 bands and not 4. It is so that the 1.5 kilohertz band is not included in the pass refer criteria. Of the other 4, there is 3 that reach the pass, and 1 where we can see the dark area, that is what would have generated a pass, but it never reached that. So it is the first and the third and the fourth band that allowed it to pass. Now, what else do we see on the screen? We see 2 lines with a timeline underneath. So it says from roughly 5 to 15 milliseconds. That is the milliseconds of the recording, and that is all the recordings split in 2 buffers displayed on the screen. When you divide measurements over 2 buffers, you can compare what appears inside these buffers. If a measurement is only noise, they would not at all be comparable. If a measurement is all noise-free, then they would be perfectly on top of each other. What you see here is that these buffers align pretty reasonably. So that is an indication that the noise is reasonable, and probably the part that allows it to overlap is the OAE. And if you look very carefully, you can see that the wave pattern in the beginning is faster, so that's high frequencies, and then the wave pattern in the end is more slow, means it's the low frequencies coming out last. Fine. I'll explain that a little bit in more detail in a little while. Now, What you see in the bottom graph is the same information as what is displayed in the top graph, but not in the time domain. Here it's in the frequency domain. So we have as function of the frequency how many dBs we have in OAE being green and noise being gray. Now, this graph is basically morphed into these bands, and that is basically for the layman's people, they will just look at this graph and not at anything else. And yeah, this is more for the people that want to use it at a high diagnostic or research level, you could say. Yeah, that is demoing this. I think I'll mention a lot of more details when we get back, talk about settings. So I think this is the right time to just minimize this program, go back to the presentation. And it means that I'll be talking about what is an OAE and how do those technologies work. And the story about OAE starts with looking at the physiology of the ear. We have the ear canal, the ossicular chain, and then the cochlea. This cochlea is a long tube within the middle of the basilar membrane. If you shape that tube as if you stretch it out, then you could model it like it's done in this little video. I grabbed this nice video from the internet because what it shows is how the basilar membrane is moving if you present a pure tone to the ear. So there is not movement on a single spot. Of course, the basilar membrane will be pulled in such a way that there is movement along a certain range of the basilar membrane. High frequencies are heard in the beginning, low frequencies are heard in the end. And let's go one slide further. So here I have the same picture again. And then what I want to show you is if you take a cross section of this basilar membrane in the other direction, then what you see is the inside of the basilar membrane. And if we zoom into that, you see actually the structures where we have inner and outer hair cells. If you look from above on top of the basilar membrane, you would see 3 rows of outer hair cells and 1 row of inner hair cells. Now, the way it works is that the vibration by the sound that moves the basilar membrane allows those inner hair cells to detect that there is movement. But the physiology of this basilar membrane is not allowing the system to be very precise with regards to the frequencies that you hear. So if you would only look at the physiology of the ear, then those inner hair cells, there would be a wide range where the stimulation is roughly the same, and you would not have a good frequency resolution. At the same time, you would not be able to hear the softest sounds. And this is where the outer hair cells come in play. These outer hair cells, they don't send signals to the brains. Basically, they react on the vibrations that are present, and they start moving with the identical vibrations that the sound is producing. And this movement is amplifying the movement that the inner hair cells get activated by. And it works in such a miraculous way almost that the frequency resolution becomes a lot better. So the hair cells that need to detect that pure tone, they get activated a lot more than the neighboring hair cells. And also you are able to hear softer sounds because of the help of the outer hair cells. Now, this moving along with the sound is basically those outer hair cells vibrating in such a frequency that it's producing the same sound as what was presented into the ear. And because this movement is producing sound, the sound from the outer hair cells travels back over the basilar membrane outwards and then ends up in the ear canal. And although they are incredibly soft and usually not audible, with a sensitive microphone, you can pick them up. And that is what we can make use of. So that is how the ear produces sound, and the sound that is produced by the ear we call an otoacoustic emission. The first method invented to measure this is called transient evoked OAE. Transient means that you present a click to the ear, and a click sound includes all frequencies at the same time. Now, in this picture, I represent that by 3 waveforms on top of each other. They travel into the ear all at the same time, but they do not reach their dedicated place on the basilar membrane at the same time. So, when the OAE is generated, they travel backwards at different times. And that means that in the timeline, when measuring TOAE, you will first get high frequencies back, then middle frequencies, and lastly the low frequencies. Now, how do we measure this more precisely? Here you see a timeline where I present the first click, and then afterwards a recording starts, and this recording is picking up all kinds of things. 3 things: noise, a lot of noise, reflections, because the stimulus that we created is reflecting at the eardrum, all kinds of places in the ossicular chain, middle ear, and all these reflections, they come also back. And it's also including some OAE, which is very small compared to everything else. To get rid of the noise, we do the oldest trick in the book that we do in many measurements. We repeat the presentations many times so that we can average it. And if you average the measurement, the noise floor will gradually go down, and any other signal will grow outside of the noise, more or less. Now, to get rid of reflections, we need to apply a different trick, and I visualize that here by a fourth presentation that has 3 times the size of what was presented before, but it's in the opposite direction. Basically, what happens is that the recording of these 3 measurements, afterwards you subtract the recording of the 4th measurement. And because the recording of the 4th measurement is done with a 3 times as big stimulus, all the reflections of this stimulus will cancel out against the reflections of the earlier stimuli. Only works if your click is very beautifully shaped, and if there is no distortion between having a small intensity and a larger intensity. And this is also where the limitations of TOE come in place. It limits the frequency range because of how precisely you can do this. But by repeating a package of such 4 presentations, you can find OAE. Now, what you also do when you subtract this last recording, you do not only subtract reflections, you actually also subtract a little bit of the OAE. But the OAE of a 3 times as big stimulus is not 3 times as big. It is maybe the same or slightly bigger, depending a little bit on the intensities that you're working with. But this OAE that you subtract doesn't cancel out the other 3. So the OAE that you end up with is basically a difference measurement and not an indication of the exact intensity of the OAE, but a leftover proving that there is OAE. Okay, that's DOE. Let's talk about DPOE. DPOE was invented in the US, and the reason that it was invented was because the TOE, there was a patent on it. So they needed a different method. Still, historically, you see that in Europe, where TOE was invented, TOE is more popular. In the US, DPOE is more popular. I'll give you my opinion, which one should be a little bit of a winner, maybe, in my opinion. But let's first explain how it works. We put the probe in the ear again. This time, we present to you 2 pure tones. These pure tones, they cause the basilar membrane to be activated like it's visualized here. I will show that more precisely by showing it in a frequency range from low frequencies to high frequencies, the F1 and the F2 frequency. And here I'm showing the area in which the basilar membrane gets activated. Now, first of all, the OAE produced by these pure tones, you cannot measure it because you're presenting at the same time. So we are not measuring at the same frequency as where we present. luckily something very special is happening. The area of the basilar membrane that is activated by both tones, they have a additional OAE frequency that is being produced. And here you see it visualized. It's the same distance as between the two stimuli, but then further down you see there is an OAE with that frequency produced. And actually, you can see there is harmonics being produced as well, but they are typically so small that we ignore them. What we do in DPOE is that we try to measure this distortion product. It's a distortion product of the basilar membrane that is active around the F2 frequency. That is also why the test frequency gets labeled by the F2 frequency. But we actually measure much further down in the frequency domain to say if there is an OAE, yes or no. And that is good to realize, because if you measure very low frequencies, where you want to measure get so far down in the frequency range that noise, which is also typically more in the low frequencies, becomes more of a problem in the low frequencies. Anyway, that's TOE, DPOE. Let's make a comparison between the two. So now we're going to simplify things a little bit again. They are both good at measuring in the middle range from 1500 Hertz to 4000 Hertz. They are both poor at measuring at lower frequencies. The technology is slightly different, so the reasons is slightly different, but it doesn't really matter. We don't measure the lowest frequencies. Then the range between 500 and 1000 Hertz, TOE is slightly better. It's because when you use the DPOE, the story I just told, that the actual measurement is done so much lower that you are already affected by noise a little bit more. But then on the other side, DPOE can measure above 4000 Hertz. With TOE, you can't do that. One thing is that the click might be distorting. Another thing is, and that's the biggest reason, high frequencies, they come out of the ear first. And whatever comes first is most disturbed by all the reflections and the ringing of the stimulus. And depending on how good an equipment is in producing stimuli without ringing, it would allow to measure in slightly higher frequencies. But TOE is very limited in that you will never get as high as with DPOE. With DPOE, you just need to be able to present the stimuli at the right intensity, and then you measure as high as you want, basically. Then something that is said in the past about these two technologies, when you do TOE and it is quiet, you measure all frequencies at the same time. So that makes people think that you can very quickly get to a pass result. In my demo, I maybe already showed that the time differences are not that significant. I think actually in my case the DPOE was a little bit faster, but that could be a coincidence. DPOE is definitely saving you time when you measure in a noisy environment. In a noisy environment, you immediately affect a big range of the frequency range with TOE, but in the distortion in the DPOE, the noise is only a disturbance if it is around either the stimuli or the frequency where you're measuring. And it means that it's less vulnerable to noise. And that's actually the reason why I like distortion products slightly better than TOE. So I put question marks here. I think that nowadays DPOE has evolved in such a way that it became a little bit a stronger player, but it's still mostly a political choice in countries if they follow the TOE or the DPOE screening methods. Now, if you now apply all this knowledge to screening, we can simplify even further, because in the end, an OAE is an OAE. It doesn't matter if you measure it with one or the other one. If you prove there is otoacoustic emissions, you prove there is outer hair cell function. And you prove actually a little bit more. You also prove that the pathway towards the cochlea, it must be more or less normal or free, because if there is a small hiccup in the middle ear, not even significant to be of influence of the hearing itself, but the OAE are at such low levels, if it gets damped on the way out, you don't measure it. And if you present a stimulus, it gets in slightly lower, and then the OAE gets out slightly lower as well. So small problems in the middle ear, not significant in itself, will already cause the OAE to not be able to be recorded. Then it is good to notice that OAE does not give you information about inner hair cell function or about acoustic nerve function. It means that for the big group of babies that need newborn screening, it doesn't really matter. Everyone, or all the babies that have a normal birth and no problems at the start, so the babies that are not part of any risk groups, for example, hearing loss in the family and so on, if you measure OAEs, the chance that you anyway have something neurological or with the inner hair cells is so incredibly small that that chance is a little bit ignored in OAE screening. In the risk groups, you don't ignore it, so there you need other technologies to screen and say something about the acoustic nerves. Now, the last point here, what do we say if it is a refer? In practice, it is really so, if you have a refer, you don't know anything. You need to be quite good to both judge, or both, to judge all the circumstances, to judge, did the probe fit properly? Could there be minor middle ear something? Could there be something affected by the noise? Could there be misfortune of other types? But there are so many small things that can be in the way of measuring OAE. If you don't measure it, you cannot really say, now there is a big chance of the ear being bad. That's only possible if you've done a diagnostic test and you know really what you're looking at, and you can make an interpretation of the technical side of the measurement. Okay, I'm going to jump back to my software and have a look at the different settings that we have available for OAE. I start in the general setup in the OAE tab. In here, there is some settings that are crucial for a good demonstration. And I start with the most important one, stop on pass. If you set this one on stop on timeout, your measurement will, your DPOE measurement will continue until it reaches the end of the timer. So if my protocol is set up to measure maximum 4 seconds per frequency, even if it already reaches the pass, it will jump to the next, or it will complete the 4 seconds before it jumps to the next frequency. So if you want to demo a quick screening possibility, make sure it is saying stop on pass. The second thing that you can do to make things slightly easier is to always make sure that DPOE is measuring from the highest frequency first and the lowest frequency last. Lowest frequencies have more noise content, so smaller chance of being a pass. And by starting at the higher frequencies, the chance is bigger that after 3 measurement points, you already reach that pass, and then the measurement can stop. So those two are, for optimization. Then I'll explain the bottom two as well. Ear volume on means that the intensities in the ear is automatically adapted to the acoustics of the ear canal. So in small ears, we need to increase or decrease a bit. In big ears, we need to increase the volume a bit to present the stimuli at the right intensity. So default, I would put it at on. Then the -10 dB SPL is about the minimum required OAE level. So the DP signal needs to be at least -10 dB SPL before we allow it to be acceptable. Now you can set it to -15 or -5. I see no reason to change it. -15 would be taking slightly more risk on artifacts. I'm not saying that our instrument will produce them, but it's very unlikely, but -10 is also for other manufacturers a typical value that is used. And if you put it at -5, you're basically making your life a little bit more difficult, and that's also not necessary. So you're allowed to change it maybe because making it comparable to the competition that allow these type of changes, but I would actually not touch this setting. No. The last one, probe check, we already talked about. We did that in the beginning. You can actually demo it to your customers and tell it's good behavior to do a probe check, depending on how often you use OAE, but maybe every day or every week, because it means that you can check if anything is faulty. You know that since the last probe check, there's only a couple of measurements that could be affected. Another comment that I learned today is that maybe when you see people using the r14o in the clinic and you show with their instrument to use this test cavity, this test cavity fits very, very narrow around the probe tip. It means that if people use it a lot, but they don't clean the probe tip properly or often enough, you actually get dirt being collected because this cavity will scrape it off each time. So if you see a dirty cavity, it's a signal that your customer is not cleaning the probe tip properly enough, and you could give them a gentle hint that they need to pay attention to that. Yes, that's the general settings. Then we go into the settings for the different tests, and I'll start with DPOE again, but I'll take it from the diagnostic test. So we go into the settings. Just start at the left top. The timeout is basically if you want it to test for 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, 16 seconds, or automatically. If it's on automatically, in combination with what I've shown before that it stops on a pass, then you get the quick measurements. Then it jumps immediately after reaching a pass. So my recommendation is for a quick demo, put it on automatic. If you want to use a protocol that is more showing off getting high signal to noise ratios, then I would say, okay, maybe we want to measure 4 seconds per point, put in a few more frequencies and demo it like that. And that is actually what I did in my second protocol. I just made it slightly different. But my first protocol is intended as a screening demo. It has the artifact level at the loudest available setting. It means that it's not rejecting measurements very quickly. And this is what I recommend because we have this fantastic Bayesian waving implemented that makes sure that noise is not affecting the measurement as bad as in the past, basically. Then we get to the technical settings about the stimulus level of the F1 and the stimulus level of the F2. Basically, my recommendation is to set it to these values, 65 dB for F2 and 10 dB louder for the F1. It's very standard from literature and research that this is very likely to produce the biggest OAEs in the patients. So why would we do differently? Of course, if you have a different purpose for the test, if you want to see at what level do OAEs become recordable, yeah, then you need to start at a lower intensity level. But that's not really the intention of most of the tests. In the screening, you use this, nothing else. Frequency retest. If you set it to yes, it means that, for example, the test starts at 4,000 Hertz. If it refers in the first attempt, it will immediately try to measure it again, but with a small offset. The idea is that some scientists have found that in the fine structure of OAEs, when you measure them, sometimes you hit a notch where a ear doesn't produce the best OAEs. And by moving the frequency a little bit, you have a bigger chance to maybe find an OAE after all. So it's increasing the chances of getting a pass result. At the same time, I don't think that the statistics work the same. Here it is 3 out of 4. If you then are allowed to attempt each one twice, then it's actually, you could say in a way, it's 3 out of 6 or 3 out of 8. So that there is not really everywhere good attention for what it does to the statistics. And I would not do the retest if it's a screening protocol. I would just rely on the 4 frequencies. if there is a clear reason why it failed, you just retry the full test instead of allowing it to test each frequency on a different with an offset. Okay, I've been playing around, changing the settings back and forth. That made my number 1 turn yellow. If I choose the other one, go back, you see it now, it's green again. In case you didn't know, if you change something and you want to save it permanently, you hold the protocol number for a longer time until it turns green again. It means that it's saved permanently for now and in the future. I have been using in this demo Protocol 1 and Protocol 2. Protocol 2 is, oh, I actually changed the stimulus level here by accident, I see, but no, I didn't. It was at 55, right? I'm confusing myself. Sorry for that. This was more a setup for showing that we can measure high frequencies. Yeah, showing how it can be used differently. I am not really using my third protocol for anything, but you can freely change it. There is also this 65-55 protocol that fixes all the settings here, and it doesn't really allow you to change anything at all. I would ignore that. I'm actually not sure why it's there. Maybe we use it in production, but then we don't want to take it off. But use protocol 1 and 2, maybe number 3 in case there is some special needs for your demonstrations. Then I'll quickly go into the screening of DPOE, and I do so not because the settings are different, but only to show you that the settings are protected by password. The default password is 9999. This password can be changed and deactivated by going into the general setup in the security page. But other than that, this allows you to do the exact same things as for the diagnostic. Oh, well, except that the frequency range is limited. So the diagnostic test went up to 12,000 hertz, or was it 10? Don't remember. Let's check. But this one is limited to maximum 6,000 hertz. Let's see, because I want to tell you the truth. Let's check what was the frequency range. The diagnostic test goes to 12,000 hertz. Yes. Okay, good. Now I'm jumping over to TOE. I start again with the diagnostic test, go into the setup. Although I find the screen more difficult to explain what you can see in a recording, this setup is slightly easier because there is not so much to set up. You can set up how much test time do you allow as a maximum, and it runs up to 75 seconds. Now, one way of thinking could be you just set it to the maximum because you can always stop the test if it's not going as you wanted. But then in a screening environment, there might be a reason that they want to fix it to, for example, 30 seconds. Because they want to, for most cases where there is a refer, they don't want it to be manually stopped because someone becomes impatient. They want it to automatically stop, and then it's called a refer. While if someone manually stops, it's called an incomplete test. And when gathering statistics of screening programs, they want to see the difference between the two. So yeah, that's why it's there. Now, the artifact level, similar to DPOE, it can be at a very high level. Here we allow it to be switched off. Off means that we use a very high artifact level in the background that it almost never will kick in. It's just set to guard the boundaries of the equipment, so to say. Stimulus level, in literature, it is said that with 83 dB SPL as a click stimulus, you reach more or less the best OAE results. We've chosen to have 5 dB step size, so 85 is the closest one, and that's why I recommend always to use 85 dB SPL. And the rest is about setting up the passing criteria for the test. The frequency bands available in TOE is always 5 bands, but typically in the screening protocol, you want to have a 3 out of 4. So you can select if you include 1 kilohertz or the 1.5. It's up to the users basically to decide if they want to choose one or the other one. And then the last bit here, correlation, is about those two buffers that I showed that can be compared in the timeline. As soon as you put in a number there, then the pass criteria needs also to match at least the correlation that is shown here. And for an easy demo, just in case, I didn't need it maybe in my demo, but if it's a little bit more noisy or something, it's easier to demo it when it's switched off. If a user wants to have it at some number when they do a screening, that's up to them, is my opinion. I only use my first protocol. There is a second and third one. There's so few settings that I almost never have a reason to make a second or third protocol for some other reason. So this is all there is in the TOE setup. And again, if I would show it from the screening test, then I need the password to enter it. That allows me to go to the next topic already. Who are our OAE users? Now, potentially all who want to test hearing in children. If you think about why are the ears of a child tested and what test do they use, I think you can always ask a customer who is seeing children with audiologic questions. You can always ask, have you thought about using OAE on the children? And they might say, well, why? Well, because it's a perfect tool to prove that the hearing is normal. And it is so quick and easy. It takes away a lot of doubt if it's otherwise difficult to say something about the hearing. So in my opinion, it's not just newborns. It's not just newborn screening. When I was in clinic in the first, from 2000 to 2008, we made it standard to do OAEs on every child that we saw. Not only because we wanted to learn about OAE, but also because it gave that confirmation that when hearing was normal, it was really normal. When hearing was not normal, we could see when does the OAE really disappear or when do you have just small OAEs. So we used it not for screening, but more diagnostically. And I think that it's good practice to, just like you do tympanometry on children, you should also do OAE on children. That is the way it's moving. And that means also that OAE can be used at all children at primary school age. And with school age, I really mean the kids in school. So if there is hearing screening in schools, then OAE is a candidate to be used. And this is actually, it's something that is developing at the moment. So I made another slide to emphasize who could be the customers. But here I put school screening programs in, because we see a trend that hearing screening in schools is getting more popular in some countries, and the tools that they are using is not just the screening audiogram, it's also OAEs, sometimes also tympanometry. Again, ENT and audiology clinics who diagnose on children, newborn screening programs, and school screening programs. That are the primary targets, but I do see secondary targets as well. We have, where I live in Denmark, we have general practitioners that have a tympanometer in case they need to test on children if there is something with the middle ear. And I'm like, well, if there is so much doubt about hearing, why not doing an OAE instead or in addition? And there is general practitioners that are open for those type of IDs. So don't know how it is in other countries, but I think that there's opportunities there. And then another one, a secondary purpose, would be related to adults. Adults for whom you want to prove that the hearing is normal or close to normal. It could be adults that cannot cooperate to a test, either because of a mental disability, but it could also be in case there is like adults that claim that they lost hearing, and then with doing an OAE measurement, you have a first step of proving it's not all that bad as you say it is. So insurance companies or or related to occupational health, it would be a special test in that environment, but there is an opportunity in some cases to do it, or at least if there is an audiologic clinic who claims we don't look at children at all, then I would say, yeah, but is there never doubt about what you diagnose on the adults? Wouldn't it be nice to get an easy proof of more or less normal hearing? This is actually the end of my presentation. Thanks. Bye-bye.